It's an honor to have you here. Chris Mayberry and I both know a lot about you. You're here in Stouffville watching Junior A hockey. Tell us a little bit about what brings you here tonight.
Well, I was invited to bring along some books and some paintings I've been working on and just have a good night watching junior hockey. I'm a big fan of junior hockey. I look back to my days in the Ottawa Valley playing for a little team called the Inkerman Rockets. They had a junior A franchise in a town of 100 people with no rink, can you believe? But we did pretty well. We had a coach that recruited farm boys and a couple of guys from the city. And one year we played 20 games leading up to the Memorial Cup. We defeated the Ottawa champions, the Northern Ontario champions, the Halifax champions. Then we ran into Jean Beliveau and the Quebec Citadels, and they put an end to our season very quickly.
Nice. I seen that you went to St. Lawrence University and you had 101 goals in your career there. I don't know if it's still a record, but it was from what I read today, and that's a pretty big accomplishment at that level. And I know a lot of people remember you from your broadcasting days, but tell us a little about your time at St. Lawrence University.
Well, the single best decision I ever made in my life was to go to U.S. college on a hockey scholarship. I met my wife there. My mark shot up dramatically. Our team went to the Final Four 2 years out of 4. You talk about records, I laugh because we were so pioneers in those days that we didn't know we were setting records until 20 years later when they still lasted. So it's kind of nice that I went there. And
Brian, I wanted to ask you about the Hockey Night in Canada days, and I know when you joined Bill Hewitt in the broadcast booth at the Gondola at Maple Leaf Gardens, I cannot remember prior to that a two-person broadcast team in hockey. Now, were you guys the first, or had somebody else done it before you?
Well, before I joined Bill, he had a guest in the Gondola pretty well every Saturday, a sports reporter, somebody like that.
Right.
I became the permanent color guy for Bill 1965. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, that was an eye-opener working with Bill and Foster. I don't want to tell stories about them that are negative, but
legendary family.
The first game I worked with Bill, the puck went right along the goal line and stayed out.
Right.
And he said, Brian, as you know, any part of that puck on the line, it's a goal. Oops. So we go to commercial, and I said, Bill, I hate to correct you, but it has to be over the line to count. And he said, no, it doesn't. So I said, here's my rule book, Bill, Rule 33C. Puck must be over the line to count. And he said, well, they've changed that rule.
Actually, of course, they had not. But,
they had not, yeah, but that was the start of it. He was a very gentle guy, but he didn't associate with us very much. Like, we'd go for a beer after the game. He would never join us.
Right.
We'd go to a distant city for a road game. He would never go on the same flight or stay at the same hotel. So all I saw Bill was at the arena, and he called the play very well, but he was quite difficult to work with in other avenues, and that's enough said, okay?
Yes, understand. But the two of you, for so many of us from my generation, you guys were Hockey Night in Canada. For those of us that got the Toronto games every night, and of course, Danny and Dick in Montreal.
Yes. I could tell you one funny story. We were getting ready for a big game. I think Bobby Hull was in town, and we're all nervous. 30 seconds before the opening face-off, Foster, who did radio next door, came in and he said, Bill, can I talk to you for a moment? He said, you know, we have our radio station and we're changing the music policy to country western. Who the hell is Conway Twitty?
That's great, Brad.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your time when you're at the Hockey Night in Canada and you were banned from Maple Leaf Gardens for speaking about Harold Ballard. I read that today. I wanted to ask you if you can tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, well, I got to know Darryl Sittler pretty well. We did a book together, and he was going through some tough times personally, and his nerves were stretched to the limit. So his doctor said, hey, you can take time off. Everybody has the right to be sick. So he didn't show up for a game in Minnesota. And we had a panel discussion about Sittler's absence. And I took his side, saying a guy has the right to be ill. And why don't they treat Sittler like they treat Bobby Clark in Philadelphia? And I guess I was aiming those barbs at Imlach, but Ballard heard about them and he said, get that guy out of my building. And Dick Barrows and Hodge came to my defense, and so he softened a little bit. I'll let him do the post-game show and whatever else, but I don't want him in the gauntlet being the color commentator again. So the next 8 years I worked in Montreal and in Winnipeg, and I thoroughly enjoyed those avenues. There wasn't any pressure in those cities.
Well, that's good. You had a friend, Bob McNeil here from Stouffville, that I met you guys a few years ago at Boston Pizza. I had a real good talk with both of you. And Bob's kind of a legend around town too, and he passed away. But do you have anything you want to say about Bob?
Well, he was such a wonderful guy, a very gritty hockey player. He was never an NHLer, but he played overseas. And with our old timers, he just fit in beautifully. A wonderful guy, and Bob Hazard is another guy from Stouffville who we played with the old timers. Another great family in hockey. He told me once playing with the Leafs, and I think he scored the first goal on television, Bob Hazard did. He said Max Bentley liked to make a dramatic entry into the game. He would leap the boards at the perfect time when everybody was watching. This time he was just ready to pirouette over the boards when I opened the gate, and he fell flat in his face right down in the gate and onto the ice sprawling. And I felt terrible, but the crowd was laughing and hooting, and he said Max was very embarrassed, but it's just one of those silly things that happens in hockey you remember.
That's a great story. I know you got to get back to. If Chris has any other questions, we will let you get back to your book signing, and thank you so much for coming to the game, and we'll see you around town. Hopefully you get a coffee sometime, Brian.
Okay, Brad, let's do that. Chris, nice talking to you. Good luck with you.
Thank you very much, Brian. It's an honor and a pleasure to meet you.